So the next thing that is resulting and being driven by that is of course the interplay between the spike proteins that are circulating plus the endothelial cells being completely inflamed and fueling thrombosis formation. And these, at the center stage of all this, they are these microclots. Ali, you are do you send already now samples to Vaughan in Alabama? Do you use that for your patients as well, the laboratory?
I have patients and specimens there. And there's research being done with that technology in at Yale in particular, doing controlled studies as well.
Good.
Plus, there are some more standard laboratory tests in the US that I can do that look at the effects of blood clotting in patients, and I find these helpful because I can get them done very quickly, whereas the studies that Vaughan is doing may take 2 or 3 months to get complete. He's so backlogged.
We keep an eye on it, just like to check how well does it play out. You cannot monitor every patient, but we can see a tendency that these are going down. But interesting is, of course, when we had the discussion with Hirschman, what can come out in some of the deceased patients, plus also now in living patients, they find more and more of these very, very scary, big rubber-like, we call them calamari clots. And so we've been on a working group since a while. We have not concluded yet what can lead to it, but it's probably a cascade of several things leading to that. And one of the things is, like I said, is the endothelial inflammation, of course, and of course the spike protein itself, because it is highly amyloidogenic. That means once it gets, especially when it gets attacked, like Hammerstrom could prove 2.5 years ago, that when our own organism tries to attack the spike protein, it converts into amyloidogenic, and even, let's stick to the amyloid for now, because the amyloid will then go into the thrombosis formation, but also into the neurodegenerative formation of amyloid beta aggregations in the brain. Plus, now you find a lot of that also, the amyloidosis below the neck, as Kevin says, in the heart, in the muscles, post-exertional malaise would then dispose a lot of amyloid out of the muscle into the extracellular space. Very strange things happening there with all the amyloids coming probably from the spike protein. And so when the spike protein itself meets the blood, that's already bad, as shown in this study here. You see the upper row of slides here is no spike, and the same blood, same sample. Once you add the spike, you see already the formation of platelet aggregation and the formation of blood clots. Just the spike alone, not even neutrophil elastase or anything else. And then, this paper from Pretorius, of course, where we see the fibrin amyloid aggregation together with endothelial debris leading to these microclots. And we had some success already with the patients taking the dietary supplements within a few weeks. This was a very fast one, to go from the scale 4 out of 4 to 2 to 2.5 out of 4. And that is, of course, remarkable because it was without any blood thinners. You can do the same with blood thinners, but it's not really a sustainable effect. And so, and the problem is, if you work with blood thinners, you might face another problem. It's now being very well documented that we have a lot of microbleeding in the patients. Because you saw that the vascular permeability through the inflammation is increasing. And so now you can have blood leaking out of the vessels, so to speak. In 12% of the cases where people had microbleeds, cerebral in the brain. And so if you indiscriminately hit on them with blood thinners, it might make it worse. So blood thinners should not really be the answer. The answer would be to calm down the endothelium, get the spike out of the endothelial cells, restore the whole system. And by doing that, you will not have to worry so much anymore. You will stop the microbleeding and the thrombi formation. And especially in the brain, this is now another hypothesis of mine, is that the complete liquid system in the brain is severely disturbed. And I put this old rotten heating pipe system here because you have valves and you have tubes, and that's pretty similar in our brain. In our brain, we have the neurovascular system, we have the glymphatic system, and they have the CSF system, all working pretty much in concert, and that should not be disturbed. So in the vascular system itself, it's clear. You see all these papers that it's already visible on the brain scans that after mild COVID-19, you have a strong decrease in the brain blood flow, blood supply. Yeah. So how does that happen and why? And what can we do about it? Even in mild infection, you have always the same picture, certain parts of the brain having a bad circulation. And it's not only the pipe system, you have also the so-called neurovascular coupling. That means the vascular system is coupled with the central nervous system, and that is like a computational system running the fluid distribution and velocity in the brain. And the first one that gets hit is what you can see here. These are the very small arteries and veins going to the brain. These are the arterioles. And then from there, you have branching of microcapillaries. And that is where you get the supply to the neurons. And at these junctions here, they're called precapillary sphincters. Yeah, that is where you really fine-tune the blood flow and supply to your neurons. And that is being done by the so-called pericytes. But unfortunately, the pericytes are the most susceptible to SARS-CoV-2 virus and spike. And they act like a hose clamp, kind of. And so once they get infected, and they do, and very quickly, so once you expose the RBD of the spike protein to the parasites, the diameter of the small arteries decreases immediately within minutes, and it stays there. So that means you're choking off the blood supply to the brain. No wonder that these people have brain fog. And the bad thing is that the parasites, when they get infected, they turn senescent. And when they turn senescent, they stay in a contractile position. So that's going to stay like that, choking it up. Then, of course, you have the second system that is strongly disturbed, is the so-called lymphatic system. The lymphatic system mainly works when we sleep. It has not been discovered so long ago, a few years. And I was happy to listen to Michael van Elzeker when he explained that. But I did a lot of my own research, and it's very clearly shown now that it is, first of all, disrupted in post-COVID conditions. That means your brain cannot get rid of schmuck, of toxins and amyloids and inflammation and toxic peptides as it usually does. So you have a locked up system, and it's working through the astrocytes. So the astrocytes are the small glia similar cells in the brain, and they're attached to our vascular system, and they take out the trash, so to speak. And if they are affected, a certain part of these astrocytes is called aquaporin 4, and that's very prone to get invaded by spike or be affected by SARS-CoV-2. And once that happens, then of course you're closing the valve, and nothing can get out of the brain anymore. And that's what we see there. They also turn senescent, and that is why also you see such high GFAP levels in the long COVID patients. That's glial fibrillary astrocyte proteins. So very clear indication that this is one of the biggest problems in long COVID and post-vac brain fog, etc. Then the CSF system, I will not go too deep today, is a third liquid system between the central nervous system and the brain itself. And the most exchange happens in the so-called arachnoid or subarachnoid space under the skull. And that is full, as we've seen, with spike protein and inflammatory other toxins. And so if that is disturbed, you have the disruption of the blood CSF barrier, impaired CSF secretion, composition, and increased intracranial pressure. And the cells that are mainly affected are epithelial cells in the blood cerebrous blood fluid barrier. They are very strongly hit, as you can see here, by SARS-CoV-2. And that is leading to what I call the pressure cooker hypothesis. Yeah? So that means we have an incredible influx on one hand by a destroyed blood-brain barrier, all the toxins, even spike proteins, all the toxic peptides, inflammatories, even immune cells and inflammatory cytokines can enter the brain, but on the other side, as the lymphatic system is blocked, it cannot be drained. So that's why you are kind of breeding now. We call this a fast breeder for neurodegenerative disease. And that means in the first, after let's say in the second phase, you will see an enhancement of neuroinflammation, to which I count microgliosis, astrogliosis, demyelination, ferroptosis, mitochondrial dysfunction, calcium influx, and all that. Combined with that, you have a complete disruption of the neurotransmitters, plus high glutamate, low GABA, blah, blah, an endless list. But the real worrisome part is then the phase 3, when you start having amyloid beta aggregation, tau proteins, alpha-synuclein, TDP-43, Lewy body formation that are very, very clearly leading to severe neurodegenerative disease with ALS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc. We've been looking at that since a long time, as you know, investigating that, and it is now showing already in real-life metadata. This is Australia. The number of people who were dispensed dementia-specific medications for the first time between 2013 and 2023. And especially since 2020, you can see a very strong uptick here. So it is, again, leading to Alzheimer's disease and dementia, or accelerating it, or both. The worst I've seen so far is this here. That's US. From 2022 to 2023, get an increase of 50% in 1 year of Parkinson's cases. So that is a little bit more than just a small statistic abnormality. And so we are working on that in the lab here with Kevin. Kevin is an expert on, he worked 20 years on open primates' brains to find treatments and stimulation and whatever interventions to fight Parkinsonism and Alzheimer's and other neurological diseases. So I thought it would be a good idea we make a laboratory for him, because he knows so much about spike. Him and Charles Rixey are very, very knowledgeable about what the spike can do and what is in there. So why not combine this now with good experiments? And the most important piece of equipment I bought was this from Berlin. It's an RT Quick reader that you use for, that's like the gold standard testing for chronic wasting disease, especially in the US now, because you have a very large uptick in chronic wasting disease in the deer in the Midwest. And so the hunters are now obliged to send samples from the animals to a lab to make sure that you have no prions in the meat. And that is the machine to do that. That's what they use in Rocky Mountain Lab and other laboratories to detect the prions. So what we hope we will fail with is to find prions in vivo. Yeah. So it's the first time. You must wish us bad luck with an experiment.
I can see your game. It says it is possible to taste nattokinase effect. So do you have any thought on effectiveness of nattokinase applied to treat this condition?
I have no opinion. Like always, I have no opinion. I wait for results.
Absolutely. I know that. So have you had any results so far?
Not yet. We're working on it. So, of course, in this RT Quick reader machine, we have several wells. And so Kevin is preparing now spike protein, PRP precursor, and neutrophil elastase and other enzymes, and nattokinase, and whatever, N-acetylcysteine. And we will try to first measure and to to use neutrophil elastase and spike for PRPSC aggregation as a control. Also, it hasn't been done yet, so we will be I think we were the first ones to show in an RT-Quick machine that this is producing a prinergic precursor.
This may, Joachim, this may not be limited to nattokinase. And so I think one of the important questions to look at are proteolytic enzymes in general. Are they helpful or harmful?
Exactly.
There's a product that with multiple proteolytic enzymes combined with a probiotic that was shown to help post-COVID fatigue in a randomized controlled trial. But that's a short-term study. So what happens long-term?
Yeah, you know my mindset in that direction. I look at spike like a booby trap. Don't touch it. Take it in one piece. Better. But okay, there's so many people using nattokinase, so I would like to settle the question: is it dangerous or not to the best of our abilities? And that would be with a machine like that and other enzymes. Yes, you're correct, absolutely, because you never know. They might be just perfectly fine and take that spike protein apart, and then whatever residue comes out, we can easily deal with that. Yeah? But nobody knows. Nobody's taking any effort in generating solid information. Now, so that's why we're going to do that. Yeah, and so here that was interesting because I did some research here, and so after an infection, you can have between 72 billion spike proteins circulating, and the mRNA vaccine could be in the range of 30 billion spike proteins. That sounds a lot, but if you look at the number of cells we have, we have 35 trillion cells overall. It will still be not a large part of our organism. I give you later an example of how much we think is affected. We can almost measure now. We know how much is persisting. Yeah, but again, for the neurological disease, we see here that there is even mild COVID can start to do these damages. And this is in German, sorry, but I will this is really a bombshell. Even without subjective or objective neurological symptoms, at the time of the MR scan, the patients showed changes in the cortical thickness and volume of their subcortical gray matter. Asymptomatic infection and asymptomatic after infection. Young, healthy people. Here, healthy young people. Brain damage. Omicron. Yeah? And yeah, so let's have a closer look now. You see here, again, that's the same study from Helmholtz showing large amounts of spike protein in 60% of all who had COVID. And you see here, that is the area that I mentioned before, the subarachnoid space, where all the liquids are exchanged, especially the CSF. And so if you have between that space and the open space in the brain, here's a better drawing. And so that's the skull bone marrow, and then is the arachnoid and subarachnoid space. And that is open to the brain parenchyma. And here you have now all the virus, all the spike proteins, and all the neutrophil degranulation at the same spot. And that will cause all these amyloids to be dissolved, created, and can migrate into the parenchyma. Plus you have, of course, direct infection of neurons. We know that. And another bombshell that nobody's aware of, SARS-CoV-2, they tested in hamsters. After 18 hours, it was not yet detectable in the blood, but it was already fully available in the brainstem and in the spine. And so a very, very clear indication now that especially Omicron is developing very quickly into a highly neurotropic virus that can cause a lot of trouble and problems directly in the brain and the central nervous system. And I always say dead people don't lie. These are slides from disease. And that is a control, a mild microgliosis. As let's say this is not a very sick person, he's a little bit affected, his brain is lightly inflamed. That's an Alzheimer, a disease with Alzheimer. That's somebody that died from SARS-CoV-2, COVID. And that looks it looks even worse. You see this schmuck in here. But then if you look at the Alzheimer patients that had COVID, that looks like you put that slide on top of that slide, and then you have this, almost like a proof of concept. And so that's what we have to watch out for in the long run now. And that means we have these fibers that Hammerstrom was describing, that we were discussing now also in regards with the enzymes. Yeah, that is, of course, bad news. And I'm still not sure how they come about, because look at this 200 nanometers. So one of these fibers here is like almost a micron, but the spike protein is only 7 nanometers, so a fraction of this. So how can an enzyme and the spike protein build such a structure? Nobody was able to explain that to me. Yeah. Because that's like 100 times bigger than the spike. So I dissolve the spike with an enzyme and something much bigger comes out. Nobody knows. Yeah. So what Hammerstrom and Nystrom did in the second study, they again took the spike proteins, and what is in the spike protein, what is the culprits, are 7 epitopes. Yeah. And these 7 epitopes that you see here, they are these amyloidogenic precursors that then aggregate. The only problem was that the 532 sequence here was very, very fast in forming human PRP-C, like Creutzfeldt-Jakob-like precursor ions in a very short time. So they were the fastest here. Lag time was, I think, 100 minutes, less than 2 hours. Yeah, so that is not good. And that is the evidence we see in vitro. And that's what I said, we have to confirm that now. And it has not been confirmed in a living organism. Maybe it doesn't play out. That would be the best. You know? Yeah, and it's these fibers here that are the problem. I mean, you still have amyloid beta 40-42 ratio being disrupted in the long haulers and so on. So the amyloid is, of course, for now, the bigger problem that we know of. You know? But nonetheless, I've been working on the prime angle of things with the nasal spray since better part of 3 years now. Yeah, so I think that we have a chance. They say it can't be treated, but I don't take that as the final conclusion. Yeah, so look at this curcumin with the PRP-SC scrapie-like prions would dissolve them pretty quick at a concentration of 80 micromole, which is not difficult to reach. No? Okay, curcumin is difficult to get in the brain, but I think we found a way. Yeah? And same here for central nervous in the CSF. You can see the same fibers and all that. It's probably all amyloids or amyloid-like fibrils that can be taken apart. And the spike is prone to do that in many different ways. You see that here, different amyloid-like structures resulting from the exposure to spike protein very clearly. So we can concentrate on the well-known compounds that we know are not really cytotoxic, that do a lot of other good things. Yeah, again, like green tea and resveratrol being very clearly now identified in reducing Alzheimer causing amyloid plaques in the brain. Yeah, so that's good news. These are dietary supplements. Yeah, same here for resveratrol. You see here amyloid beta aggregations, and a few hours later, under resveratrol influence, completely clear. Again, it's in vitro. It's not yet in vivo, but I mean, it shows that there must be some way to do that. And the same, by the way, the same 7 epitopes that cause all the amyloid aggregation do the same with alpha-synuclein. Yeah? And alpha-synuclein is one of the aggregates that can lead to Parkinson's disease. Again, resveratrol, another, again, king in the ring. Look at that. At different dosage, it can take the alpha-synuclein apart. Now, there's many more. I think we can maybe skip a few slides because we have not even gotten halfway through. So the here, that was what I wanted to show you. The melatonin surprise. That's why we have that in that nasal spray. Look at that. Cortex viral load without melatonin. They even had to cut the bar because otherwise that scale would be like covering the whole page. So the difference is like in several orders of magnitude in cortex viral load by just applying melatonin. Wow. That is really impressive. And that's in the brain, in vivo, in cortex. So that I really like. Giving hope. Then we have to also take care, like I mentioned before, the glutamate, GABA suppression, kynurenine, tryptophan pathway, 5-HT, NAD+, and all the, let's say, the neurochemistry in the brain, which will be a field just by itself. So I would say we make another webinar on that just alone, because also you, Leo, are far advanced in that and looking at the gut-brain axis, because it all plays into that. It starts from the gut, from the tryptophan conversion all the way into the brain. So you can't just look at it separately. So we need to make another round of that. Yeah. Let me go now into the immune system, because that is where we are ending up anyhow today with the spike persistence.